We're just about at the top of the hour. We'll get started in just a moment. If you care to, let us know where you're from in the chat. Oh, I see somebody we know, Jeff. That would be Zach Mayers.
Now we're talking.
What's going on, Zach? And Zach is one of our Nucleus Security guys. Okay. Thanks for joining, everybody. Excited to have you here on behalf of Bugcrowd and Nucleus. Really looking forward to this conversation with some security practitioners and executives we have with us today. It's going to be Jeff and Trey. I'll be your moderator, adding some color here and there when I have something to contribute. All right. Where's everybody else from? Got Jeff from Ohio. Anyone else want to share where they're from? Or we're going to be security conscious. Got it. All right. So let's get into it, folks. We're at 1 after. Don't want to keep anybody waiting. First, let me introduce the experts we have joining us today. We have Trey Ford, CISO at Bugcrowd. Trey, you want to say a few words about yourself? A little bit about your background?
I'll offer a big howdy from Austin, Texas. Excited to connect with y'all. Thanks for having me on. Been around the security game for a while. I think my first job on the internet was in 1993, working for an ISP back in Liberty, Missouri. Been doing the cyber thing for a while. I was one of the early folks at Fishnet Security. Spent some time at White Hat Security with Jeremiah Grossman and Snake. Spent some time in product management. I worked at Zynga. So if you care deeply about your Farmville farms or your Mafia Wars or any of those terrible Facebook games, I was doing security operations and a bunch of stuff there. I helped produce the Black Hat Hacking Conference. I'm still on the review board there. Matter of fact, I've got a call for the startup innovation competition this afternoon. But longtime fan of the space, very excited to take a hard look at something we've been doing for a long time, and looking forward to the conversation. Thanks for having me on.
Thanks for joining us, Trey. Looking forward to it. And Nucleus's own CISO, Jeff Gouge, is here with us too. Welcome, Jeff. Do you want to say a few words about your background and what you do here at Nucleus?
Sure. Thanks, Adam. So yeah, Jeff Gouge, been with Nucleus here since nearly the beginning, not as soon as Adam, but around that same time, 2020. And my previous experience all goes back, I've worked with different fields. So I was in software engineering at one point. I was also in QA in the past and then in cyber ever since. And, from that different backgrounds as well, I worked over 10 years in the state and specifically higher education world, which is a very challenging world for cyber with many different personas and personalities. You don't have to deal with just employees, but you also have to deal with parent roles, student roles, active roles, non-active roles, all of those things as well. And so that's where the history goes there. And here at Nucleus, I'm in charge of just about all things corporate. So that includes the IT arm as well, but with the focus of security.
Thank you, Jeff. Thanks for being here today. Looking forward to your contributions to the discussion. And we like these to be interactive. We don't like to just, talk and monologue amongst ourselves. We really like when the audience gets involved. So no need to hold your questions till the end. You are very welcome to drop them into the chat at any time, and I will notice those and we'll jump over to them. So with that, gentlemen, let's dive right into it. And, we're here to talk about from chaos to clarity. And so, let's begin with the chaos part, right? So fragmentation is the word we're using today to describe chaos, I think. This is definitely not a new concept in cybersecurity, as you both well know. But a lot of security leaders are seeing it as really the core risk in vuln management. So I'm going to start with you, Trey. So, when you look across the different companies you're advising on a regular basis and the ones you've worked in too, how does this fragmentation or chaos really show up in day-to-day security operations?
Fragmentation and chaos, those are such great labels. I think about uncertainty and I think about modern design and what we're trying to be doing as leaders and creators, trying to create thoughtful experiences. We're not using uncertainty by design. We're experiencing uncertainty, whether it's a lack of alignment, even within our own org, across our tooling, across our partner teams with engineering and IT. And our own tools don't play well together. And so when we start thinking about where to gather data, how to turn that into information or knowledge, there's a whole bunch of problems, whether it's visibility from tooling, the notion of inventory, our ability to make accurate, efficient observations that are not only current, but providing a trend, and how to maintain trust and relationships across the organization, both internally and externally, internally inside of security and externally across the rest of our partnerships inside of our enterprise and with our customers. Driving clear, honest, current and correct transparency and alignment across those teams is extremely difficult. I don't see a whole lot of folks doing this very well.
Yeah, thank you for that. One thing that came to mind as you were describing that, I was thinking about, a 1,000-piece puzzle that you might do at home. And when you first like dump it out of the box, those pieces are just scattered all over the place. They're not in any kind of matching pattern or anything like that. And that's what comes to mind when I think of where some, businesses and security organizations are with their security programs when they, come to a Bugcrowd or come to a Nucleus and they're looking for help. Well, that's great. Thanks very much for that perspective. And so I'm going to turn it to you, Jeff. So we have three questions here. These are kind of the big questions that we deal with and are having conversations about every day with different security leaders at different companies. Talking about asset coverage, fragmentation obviously is indicative of assets sprawled out across the organization without having full visibility into what they are, the status of various vulnerabilities and your posture related to those vulnerabilities, and the actual risk. And these things sound very simple, but maybe they're not. And Jeff, I was hoping you could help us answer why these are such difficult, challenges at scale, and also Trey, like how do CISOs typically navigate this disconnect with their leadership? So I'll start with you, Jeff.
Yeah, thanks. And these problems are hard at scale for a few different reasons, right? This comes into when you're dealing with data, and I would even say big data or large amounts of data. When you start combining all of the asset data that your company might have, all of the hardware and software data that you might have, that is your inventory, and then you slap on all of the different scanners for all of those different things. And then what happens is over time, those continue to grow, right? The data typically doesn't get any smaller. There is no perfect security. You would think that you can work your way down to zero, but that's not the goal, right? Your goal is to always improve and always maintain and manage your risk as best as possible. So, the biggest and hardest questions, these are hard at scale because the data is just so big. If you don't invest in automation and you don't invest in, tools like Bugcrowd and tools like Nucleus, they just become unwieldy, right? A company, especially nowadays, and as efficiency becomes, a big key part of any and all businesses, the real thing to focus on is, do you really want to keep investing in, manual work? You don't want to invest necessarily, most likely, in analyst work all the time. That doesn't necessarily scale, right? As your business gets bigger, as your company grows, which every company wants to do, they want to grow. You should be investing in automation, right? Have those analysts or maybe move them into engineers that are investing in automation to help grow with that company, because that data is not getting any smaller. And then if you want to look at that at the macro level, think about how much data you have to pull in, right? All of this data, as it becomes bigger and bigger, what also ends up happening is you have to run analysis on these. So now you're creating metadata, and then, by the way, you're enriching it with other sources like, CISO Kev, obviously CVE and other types of data. So you're slapping data from all over the place, but at the same time, you're also trying to keep it current. Like, is this still the most current thing? So I think that's why these are expensive problems, right? Technology and the hardware is going to have a hard time keeping up with these big data analysis questions. And then having a platform like a Nucleus, for example, is where it can help, because basically those expensive questions are solved for you, right?
Yeah. So what I heard there, Jeff, is really in part it's a volume problem, right?
Yeah.
It's just there's just so much data, and with there's the story we were telling 5 years ago at Nucleus. It's with the rise of cloud infrastructure and just how many more assets there are today than there were, maybe 5, 10 years ago.
Yep.
And Trey, how do you see security leaders sort of navigating the difficulty and the expense of answering these questions?
Man, there's a hamster wheel of pain, right? So we talked about fragmentation a moment ago, and when we start thinking about the universe of questions we have to answer as CISOs, most of the data we need to gather to start informing, and we're like I'm referencing analogies, and I want to make sure that we're talking about them correctly. There's data, information, knowledge, wisdom, the DIKW kind of pyramid. It's the progression. Data is all your logs. You get alerts that may turn into information. Once you triage them, you know if it's true or false. If it's a false positive or negative, you can trend that. That goes to knowledge, and once you start anticipating changes, that turns into wisdom. The same universe applies to vulnerability management and getting a sense of our posture. I'm going to cross that analogy apologetically with aviation. So you're in an airplane and you're flying to an airport. You're flying through clouds and you can't see. This is a lot like the security organization. You can't just walk through the grocery store and take an inventory. We don't know where all of our systems are. So we have a whole bunch of different systems and data sources that are gathering information to paint an operational picture, a level of situational awareness to tell us where we are right now. But looking at the dashboard doesn't tell you that. You're looking at all these tools and they're going to give you their picture, their vantage point. And there's varying levels of signal and noise and accuracy. There's a constellation of what might be true across all of these systems, but they don't all talk together. They don't deduplicate. They don't tell you if they're lying to you or giving you their best guess. And at some point, we have to answer these expensive questions with confidence, with conviction, and with credibility. And you only get to strike out so many times before they kick you off the batting roster. What we're talking about across the other businesses, when we're going to IT saying, hey, I need a better sense of inventory, I need a better sense of current posture, patching posture, adherence, we're asking a lot of the same questions over and over. And at a certain point, that churn, that hamster wheel of pain, you're not actually moving from where are we right now, where are we right now, where are we right now, moving towards the what's our trend? Are we trending in the right direction? And are we making the right priorities, small inputs into this very complex system of systems, infrastructure, people, processes to drive towards those right outcomes? And we've got to make changes there. So the challenges we're wrestling with is we're giving presentations to our peer executives at the QBR, and the ELT is saying, well, that doesn't align with the information I'm getting from my team, and we're losing face. We're going to the board, and our peers or our leadership, 70% of our CISOs reporting underneath a technology leader, we're reading weather reports that make them look bad. And so they're very concerned about the data we're bringing forward. They're very concerned about the narrative we're bringing forward. And aside from the reporting challenges, the conviction and the confidence we have in the information and the perspectives that we have coming forward, we're leaning on junior resources that are doing triage and analyzing data, and we're making very expensive bets with our career on something done by an entry-level employee. And that's not to pass judgment on any human that has a tendency towards failure. I think we need to dignify the humanity of us all being on our journey and trying to partner. But pointedly, some of these things should be done with automation. Some of these things should be done with a level of currency, accuracy, and giving us the ability to make those wisdom-based decisions, looking towards those trends and asking, are we providing the right tension, the right inputs, the right partnership corrections to drive towards those bigger picture outcomes? And I think we're getting lost in the busy work of all this.
Great perspective. Thank you. Moving on. So to the actual challenges of vuln management, and Jeff, I'll ask you to give some insight here. So if you could just kind of walk us through how these three challenges up here, how they really compound over time. And, as someone who I know is in the middle of this every day, especially interested in your perspective of, what it's like on a day-to-day basis to be in the middle of it.
Yeah. A lot goes into feelings here, and I think feelings are not good. One word I might put on it is overwhelming, right?
Yeah.
But one thing that also comes to mind here on top of all this is the mind map of security domains, right? I don't know if anybody here has seen that, but if not, take a look at what security teams are responsible for. And there's this mind map that people put visualizations around, and VM is just one of those little circles, probably hundreds of circles on there that they're responsible for. And if VM is just one of them, think about all the other fatigues and challenges that team is dealing with when you're dealing with a large company and a security team that has large responsibilities, right? A little bit of research I found on this, speaking of the manual work, even today, 55% of organizations are still spending over 5 hours per week just consolidating and trying to take all that fragmentation and normalize it manually, right? That's a lot of time, and these companies aren't getting smaller, right? They're getting bigger. So those questions and those basically those solutions that you have in place, these processes are becoming harder over time. So fatigue it becomes real very quickly. Alert fatigue, that is huge. Speaking, from when I was an analyst and hearing from engineers and analysts that I work with now, right? Alert fatigue is a real thing. If those employees are not seeing progress over time, like if they're coming and they're say they're spending these 5 hours a week consolidating, normalizing, or if you have automated tool, and they're seeing the same thing over and over again, and the company's not fixing it, and the company's not getting better, that's going to lead to fatigue as well. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that in the future slides as well. But, at the same time, alert fatigue could also happen just from sheer amount, right? Maybe those are better to be said as notifications instead of alerts, right? Maybe you need to start really defining when you're actually pinging humans instead of just giving them, oh, by the way, and this administrator's logged in as sudo or as root, or this new Chrome voter that came out. Well, that happens like 3 times a week nowadays. At some point you have to rely on automation to help with that fatigue, because fatigue comes in many different ways for the practitioner.
Great answer. And you reminded me of an actual Nucleus customer case study when, before coming to us, this customer was, it was a very large sort of logistics company, and they had every day a small team spending 8 hours, I think it was every Tuesday, doing this manual consolidation of scan data from different tools, correlating it up to all the assets and deduplicating. And, that's what a whole team was doing every single week on a Tuesday for almost the whole day. So that reminded me of that particular case study. Yeah. All right. Moving on to ETL hell. Trey, this is kind of your phrase that I think you kind of introduced us to. But why is reporting in the context of ETL so broken for so many teams today? And what's the business cost of this kind of inefficiency here?
Let me pause and say I love this progression of slides because this builds on everything that Jeff just covered. So think about ETL. So export, transform, load. What you're looking at is trying to move data on that journey into a section where I've got the same question being asked by a number of different tools. So let's say I'm a small or medium business that's gone through a couple of acquisitions. Well, now I have 3 different vulnerability scanning technologies, 2 different SIEMs, 5 different EDRs. Nothing talks to each other. And so there are good people doing the Lord's work, pulling those reports, to your example, on Tuesday. Patch Tuesday's rolling out. Okay, we got to do a thing. Well, what's our inventory? Like what does this look like? Zooming up to the satellite overview in private equity, I would talk to folks through our diligence process and ask, like, tell me about your vulnerability management program. Tell me about your patching SLAs. Tell me about all these things. And they always come back with, 100%, 98%. Like they've got real confidence on numbers. Sure. And I'm like, okay, talk to me about your inventory. And no one had an answer. We've got a spreadsheet that accounting keeps up. I don't understand that. And so how do we know where our outliers are? And so let's add another layer of complexity to this. So we keep talking about vulnerability management. So you've got your scanning tools that do network vulnerability scanning or some host-based vulnerability scanning. That's not looking at the rest of your AppSec universe, the rest of your cloud universe. There's all these other modalities, things that are happening in DevSecOps and what's actually being tested in the pipeline, not just the status of the code, but like what's actually getting done. There are so many nuances and so many edge cases. How do you normalize all this? So let's wave a magic wand and pull all the different families of tools across together, deduplicate it, score it for accuracy, say, well, I've got these 27 vulnerabilities that one configuration change or patch is going to fix. Please don't give the engineers 27, give them 1. And so getting towards that notion of a massive body of data that must be collapsed, cleansed, organized, deduped, scored for priority, and then put forward in the very expensive question of what's the most important thing I ask someone to do with the 20 minutes they're going to give security this week. I want it to be the right ask. And so we need to be thoughtful about that. And ETL, the whole process of normalization, I worked for a Fortune 500 company that had a dedicated team of folks that were basically doing ETL. So we could do our Patching Thursday review where we met with all the executives from all the business units. And this was the conversation we had. And those were extraordinarily expensive meetings. And If one engineering leader says this doesn't match my data, all hell broke loose. So I don't want to label ETL as hell, but there's a hamster wheel of pain that we've got to deal with. And frankly, I don't find it dignified. We need to find a way to get the humans away from doing what is boring, routine work that, if you didn't sleep well enough, you're not caffeinated enough, you're overeat for lunch, you're going to make expensive mistakes and make executives look bad. We should use the machines to do this. Spreadsheet chaos, same scenario. I still don't know how CISA and DHS have not classified Microsoft Excel as critical infrastructure. It should be. The whole world runs on it. And outdated reports. I'm going to go back to that aviation analog for a second. When you're flying a plane, can't see out the windows, you're trying to find your way to the ground, hopefully at the safe end of a runway. There are two things you're asking yourself constantly. What is my state and what is my trend? Where am I in relation to the safe approach path? And am I moving in the right direction? Just because you look down and see I'm on the glide path, left and right, dead center, right altitude, everything's correct, doesn't mean I'm going to stay on that line. I'm usually chasing the donut, trying to follow and circle all the way down that bullseye, all the way down. And all of these scanning tools are giving you a point in time. And so we've got to move from data information up to knowledge to look at what the trend is, knowing where you are right now. I don't care how many vulnerabilities you have. I do not care. The board doesn't care. What I care about is how confident are we in the information and what is the partnership between security, who's creating that tension and accountability for the other teams, and what is the partnership and alignment and priority? Are they executing on those SLAs? And that's part of why this is such a painful thing. That ETL process, getting to scoring and unifying all this data is such an expensive and terrifyingly important thing to get right.
Thanks so much for that, Trey. And you're forcing me to ask, are you an aviator personally? Do you fly planes?
I love airplanes. I make paper airplanes all the time.
Nice one. At least you don't need a license for those. Fantastic. So yeah, I'm gonna move over to Jeff now for this one. And Jeff, let's talk about, how does the sprawl we're talking about on this slide, dev, ops, security, how does this make vuln management so much harder than it needs to be for security teams?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, a lot of these are highlighting all kinds of different issues, right? There's definitely different terminology between departments and teams. We're not all, security practitioners that you're dealing with, right? Sometimes you're dealing with sales folks or marketing or, folks that have never even dealt with this industry. Competing priorities is definitely the thing, right? Every day I ask myself, and a lot of times this comes up in meetings, right? Where is that battle of security versus convenience? Where are you going to fall in that range? Are you going to, are we going to go for something here that introduces more risk and we're going to be more convenient? Or are we going to lay the line and we're going to actually have a stronger security stance here than convenient and getting something shipped fast, right? I think of a software company, we're a SaaS services company as Nucleus, right? And these type of things come up all the time, right? We are in the gov world, right? We are dealing with FedRAMP, so we're dealing with heavy compliance. We're also dealing with hundreds of customers that want things. They don't want them next year. They all want them now, right? And speed is a huge thing. And for them, speed means get it to me as quickly as possible, which is typically the exact opposite of security, right? Which is going through and being methodical and making sure the due diligence is done, and that we're, crossing all of our T's and dotting all of our I's. But the big thing with, obviously we've been talking about silos, and all of these different departments have silos of issues, and Trey mentioned acquisitions, and that brings out a whole different level of silos that get created as well. But to me, change is the one thing that is the real problem, right? If everything were to not, if change were to stop and everything were to remain consistent, our jobs become way easier, and some of these could be solvable. But literally every second change happens, right? Just look at AI, right? You take a week vacation, you take 3 days vacation, all of a sudden new products are released and launched and sometimes even acquired somehow. And I think about change, and that's why for me, standards and processes become very important, right? For these problems. You always want, one thing that comes to mind, maybe building security champions into these different departments to enforce those processes and those standards. And then obviously at some point you obviously are going to work with tools and technologies as well to assist in those.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. Oh, we all want those AI tools, Jeff.
Another day, another dollar.
Yeah, creates challenges for you. I know that. All right, so let's talk about burnout. So, Trey, you must have been exposed to this in your previous roles and probably in this role too, advising other companies. So what do you see, like what does burnout look like inside vulnerability management? And, how does that lead to churn, potential trust breakdowns, talent loss, things like that? What are you seeing out there?
I think what everyone wants to do is 20 years from now, get out of bed in the morning, roll into the office, and log into a vulnerability management tool and export the same report through an evolved UI, and then start running scripts and fixing scripts and cleaning up broken exports and troubleshooting. Like it's inhumane to ask folks on loop to do this manual process. And these small mistakes, small errors, like computers are non-deterministic. They're supposed to be. They're supposed to be very deterministic, but like you push a patch out to deploy it, it doesn't always stick. It doesn't always deploy everywhere the same way. I'm not smart enough to understand why. It does not make sense to me. But the fact is, this happens. Burnout is first starting with just a lack of humanity. We're not dignifying the people that are spending the time doing the Lord's work, trying to clean up and unify this data. Number two, when you're a developer or a sysadmin that's receiving a report full of inaccuracies or redundancies, or wow, you just gave me 700 Jira tickets that 4 patches would solve. Thank you. Now my stats are totally screwed up, and I have to go manually close all these. Who do I thank? Over the head with the back of my laptop. Like it's inhumane. And what we're doing is fostering this culture in what should be a virtuous, positive feedback loop, and it's not. And so I think it's important to evaluate. Again, we're getting lost in the churn and the toil of the process as opposed to stepping back, saying, state and trend, where are we? Where are we going? And as executives, what are the partnerships or the adjustments, or what other things need to happen to address the trend of evolution for patching or configuration updates, or the integration testing or change management, or what's happening out in the cloud management and DevOps universe? Like, these are complex systems. Why are we fighting over the mechanical state of moving data around to analyze it and get very expensive answers quickly?
Keeps going back to state and trend. I really like that phrase.
Another thing on the trust here, just to add in real quick,
Yeah,
communication is
please do.
hard, right? As much as talking about systems and everything is easy to talk about, people are the hardest things to deal with. And people to
Yes.
people, like I have so many examples to where I have great relationships with engineering or developers, right? And or whatever team you might be working with, product. And all it takes is like one slip up of words that I didn't mean in a certain way for that trust possibly to be slipped and them to feel, in a different way, and then maybe lose that trust instantly from years of, building that up. So communication is something that we always have to keep working on. There's always better ways for us to communicate, and just being as clear as possible, because when you're speaking to audience, and the larger the audience is, the more people could infer it in a different way, right? The tone, all of those things matter. And communication being hard is one thing that, the trust breakdown could come from people as well. And it's something that everybody, regardless of what you're working with, is we need to continue to work on.
I think there's also the importance, to your point, of misaligned incentives. I mean, when we're going to developers saying, hey, you've got to patch this, they worked a 14-hour day yesterday dealing with a production issue, and they're still trying to get a feature release out on time. And all they're trying to do is get it to pass the test. And they're killing themselves, and we're going to beat them over the head because something needs changed on our side. Our mission as companies, as SaaS companies, is to turn caffeine into code and code into revenue. And that comes in the form of feature releases, not security patches. We're detracting from how they're generating revenue and stockholder value capture. Like we're pulling away from these things. And I agree, they need to be able to do that. But how do we hygienically prevent this technical debt accrual over time? It's a complex thing, but at the human level, we have to honor and dignify the challenges and the priorities that they're set upon, how they're scored and judged, where their bonuses come from. And to be frank, we're not giving them things that are helping them improve their daily life. We're hopefully saving them from getting paged after hours for another production issue, a breach, or an incident. But it's real hard to correlate those things.
Excellent. All right, moving on. So I want answers, right? Trey, you often say every executive briefing comes down to 3 questions. Why are these so powerful, and what's the risk when a security leader can't answer them
I think
confidently?
I love these questions. I can't remember where I stole them. Please don't give me credit for this, but yes, I have stolen this unapologetically. There are 3 questions that whether you are a analyst or line employee talking to your manager, or if you're the CISO going to a QBR, or if you're walking into the boardroom, there are 3 questions you've got to answer. And this is the foundation of empathy. It's not about what you say, it's about what people take away. And these 3 questions will help you align with what they're going to hear, how they're going to receive it, and how they're going to take it away. What do I need to know? It needs to be a fine point. There's something you're delivering, regardless of the type of meeting, whether it's an informational meeting, a decision-making meeting, like whatever the meeting format is, these 3 things have to happen. What do I need to know is the headline. Don't bury the lead, be very direct, be very pointed, don't waste their time. Why do they care is the important part. They're going to hear it and say, huh, not my monkey, not my circus. Like, not my problem. They're like, they will tune in or out very quickly unless it aligns to things that they're incentivized or own or have accountability for. If you get to that point and you've spent all this time, they're going to say, high five, great work. Or they're going to turn around and say, okay, what do you need from me? It's a buying question. It's what do you need to be able to get to? And so if you're not prepared with what it is they need to know, why they're going to care about it, and what they need to do, what the call to action will be, you hopefully charmed them. They thought you were funny. I hope you invested in the relationship. But in terms of a business transactional outcome, you're going to fall down. If you don't have an ask, I would hesitate asking for the meeting.
I had dinner with this reminds me, I had dinner with a customer, large retail organization, and they had 22 different divisions, and the CISO and his deputy, they came to us because they had 22 different divisions, and we covered on another slide, speaking a totally different language about risk, right? They were all running security how they thought was best, and they really couldn't communicate up to the CISO, and thus he couldn't communicate up to the board. So, um, that's one of the reasons why you need that combination of people, processes, and tech to be able to, speak the same language about risk and security.
I think it's an important call out. I think most of our CISOs and security leaders come from highly technical backgrounds. That's a lot of math and deterministic structures. When you move into management, you move into strategic leadership. When you're pursuing the C-suite title, you're doing non-deterministic engineering. You're creating trust. You're driving outcomes and alignment and ability to influence. So if we're thinking about these as non-deterministic engineering constructs, these are my 3 go-to tools that you have to, with every touch point, be leveraging in those interactions.
Great stuff. All right, moving on. North Star metrics. Most of us are familiar with that term. So Jeff, SLAs, MTTR, these come up a lot in our business. How do you operationalize these metrics in the context of a full management program to build credibility with leadership, and what does that look like?
Yeah, great question. First thing, I mean, we've been repeating this over and over again, but automatically, right? Automated approaches to all of these is the way to go. Wherever you have gaps in that automation, focus on those projects to make it automated. But yeah, no, with all of these are all metrics that matter, right? SLAs matter because those are what you committed to. Are you breaching any of those? Are those going to cost the company dollars at the end of the day? That's why those matter to board level. Mean time to remediation, right? A lot of these and risk score even goes into this as well. We're talking about trends, right? You can get some of this for a weekly, but are these getting better? Are these getting worse? Are we, nearing a spot where we need to make changes? These are data that you can use to help influence your projects and your future projects, right? And then at the same time, putting all of those together into one project list, then we can actually start answering the questions. Do we know that these are the most important projects to be doing? Because you can appropriately compare those to the other projects and start comparing the incomes and the outcomes of that. Coverage gaps, this is obviously a metric that matters. This is something that you can get from Nucleus right away. It's one of the big, powerful things that you can see in Nucleus across all of your tools. You go to the assets page and you can immediately see. I actually use this weekly. It's one of the most powerful pages that we have in our program with Nucleus, is that you want to have obviously 100% scan coverage. You don't have any gaps when it comes to scanning all of your assets that you have in your from your all of your environments. But at the same time, you might have gaps within them, and those gaps might be just one or two tools, right? All of a sudden, why is a Tenable or a Rapid7 maybe not scanning this group of endpoints all of a sudden? And that might be a project that we need to go and invest time in. So these are all things that matter to leadership because we need to determine, where these things are, which way they're trending. And all of these in the end, we have to set goals for. If you're setting goals for these, you know, you're doing yourself a disservice if you're not, basically, because otherwise these are just numbers, right? Where are they in percentage to goal? Adam knows this. We talk about one of these every week within the company that we give to the CEO. Where are we on percent to goal? Is our security at risk? Are we trending in the right direction? And that's basically telling, him or her, are we focused on the right projects and making the right investments where we should be?
Sounds like state and trend again. Fantastic. Excellent. Thanks, Jeff. So, looking at the concept of a maturity journey, and I think you're exposed to this a lot in your work, how can teams or how should they evaluate where they are in terms of their maturity with regards to vulnerability management?
So I can talk about
I don't know if that was
maturity.
directed to me or you, Jeff. Sorry. Go ahead.
Sure.
I'll take it as a start. So
Yeah.
most security tools and a lot of companies in general, when you go and purchase their product, their space is going to have some type of maturity document. How mature are you in the cyber world or in the security world? Each one of those, you're going to want to judge and determine where I am on the maturity scale, right? Am I a newbie? Am I that, first time employee that you need to teach me, how to fish or teach me what I need to be doing? Or am I the advanced, engineer that's been around or architect that's been around for a long time and we're as optimized as we can be and we're focused on automation and everything's happening automatically and we're getting decisions based on that, right? So within VM, Nucleus has a VM maturity journey as well. And these levels could be 1 to 4, could be 1 to 5. But within VM itself, we actually identified 8 different areas of stages, and each one of those has a maturity, right? So assess, normalize, enrich, triage, prioritize, package, prep, and action. And each one of those has a maturity step. So you might be pretty good at assessing, and you might be a level 3, and you have some automated things on there, but you might be all ad hoc on the action phase, or even in the enriching phase, right? So each one of those in the maturity journey are something that you want to take a look at. And I'm looking at that as well all the time with the projects that we're using. What are we going to work on in Q3? Well, where are we least mature and what does that impact to the business, right? And these type of assessments that you can do as a company will help you get quantitative data around, where we are and what it would mean to the company to mature on those things.
I like this a lot, Jeff. This doesn't smell like compliance to me. Like in private equity, we try to come up with a scorecard and a ruler where we can measure the general program maturity across each of our funds and each of our portfolio companies. And it felt a lot like compliance. And for business executives, they tend to snap to this is how we're going to measure security, and it's one indicator. And what you're speaking to here is, this is the capability maturity model adapted. This is very precisely trying to score operational excellence in very important ways. This speaks to hygiene. This speaks to partnership. This speaks to mastery and management of our infrastructure. There's a lot of moving pieces here, but what this drives towards is operational excellence, and I love every part of this.
Same here. All right. Getting into the meat of it now, from chaos to clarity. So, yeah, Jeff, this is the playbook here that we profess. Could you walk us through where teams should start if they're stuck in chaos or fragmentation today?
Yeah. For me, I always go to the CIS critical security controls, right? And that's obviously step 1 in these two. Can we identify inventory is hard, changes all the time. Can we identify all of our hardware and software, right? So, these practical implementation steps, it's always starting with those. And, as we get into those, a lot of these things, when you're going towards implementation, one note that I wanted to say on this as well is the company should consider these before you go and try to purchase a tool, right? Talk and try to get alignment as a leadership team on who's going to be the stakeholders. What are our SLAs going to be? Is everybody in the leadership room on board or at the board level on board with us making this type of organizational change? Because otherwise you're going to go and buy a tool and then watch it be a paperweight on the desk because you can't get alignment across those teams and now you can't implement. And, you know, just like a SaaS product, we would use, you know, churn as the one thing we don't want to have. Well, churn's going to happen if you don't implement your customers. And that same thing's going to happen for, you know, maybe you as a CISO if you continue to invest in tools that you're actually not implementing. So, you know, for me, it's get a handle on all of this data. Try to figure out what your processes are today, you know, where your team's spending the most amount of time manually implementing these processes. And then start focusing on the technologies that could do to do that. And you can always fill some of those gap assessments if you wanted to determine, you know, where are areas that we, you know, we have risk today that we maybe don't know of, or maybe it's so new that we need to get maybe an assessment done from Bugcrowd, right? So those type of things all come to mind here with practical steps. But implementation is all about making sure you have a plan defined and that it's approved and able to be executed.
Excellent. So we can talk about politics. Not really, that's too dangerous for a webinar. So, you know, Trey, what's the mindset shift needed to get past political resistance with implementing changes like this?
We touched on this earlier, and I think it's important to underscore that as you move into leadership, you're spending less time hands on keyboard inside of infrastructure and managing systems. What we're looking at is driving alignment across teams, which speaks to incentive structures. Whether the team has an audacious goal or a pet project that they're trying to usher through, what we want to do is find a way to motivate them. That second, so what do I need to know? What do I care? What do you need from me? Why do I care is what we're going to spend a lot of time trying to unpack. Political operators will often shield or shelter, not share their motives or the reasoning for making an ask. And I prefer to operate in the open. I think it's wise to speak to, listen, here's what's happening. Here's why the organization prioritizes it. Here's why I think your folks are going to care about it. The nice thing about coming from the security side is, while there's a lot of overhead, what I'm trying to do is protect your people outside of work. I don't want them being paged back into work. I don't want them dealing with things due to lack of discipline and hygiene and functional testing. What I'm trying to do is minimize pager load. People burn out due to getting pulled away from sleep, being pulled away from families and passion pursuits. And one of the things we're looking to do is drive that alignment. There's other things that I think are unorthodox. I think there's a lot of wisdom in advocating for a moderate increase in partner teams' bonus budgets and placing back into them. We're going to add components for security functions, whether that's refueling findings that are going to need paid for a bounty finding. One of the false negatives are expensive, things that are going to leak through. So whether it's something found from external research and reported through a bounty or VDP program, or if it's a change was made somewhere and our tools went blind, what we're trying to do is avoid that. We want folks to have personal ownership in what we're doing. So the why behind it, why do I care, is such a big thing to align across the teams with and make sure they're on board as opposed to being told after they've done their budgetary planning, after they've done their feature planning, after they've committed their assets and energies. They need to know before they do all that stuff. So being a good partner is critical.
I know what you just described as WIFM. What's in it for me?
Yes. Yes.
Yeah, and Jeff, to you on the other two items on this slide, what practical fixes can help teams overcome the data quality and integration challenges that come with consolidating this big volume of data?
Yeah, these are going to be every tool. Nucleus deals with hundreds of tools, right? And I've seen even the back end and dealing with ops of these two data quality issues and integration complexities becoming hard, right? Every tool handles these differently. And then when you go to integrate and try to consolidate all of these into one spot, then you have to have a bunch of different logic to handle all of that, right? But I go back when we're talking about implementation challenges and these quality control issues. I go back to the grassroots, right? What is the problem you're actually trying to solve? go back to the problem you're trying to solve and what does it mean to the company. And then, you'll work through these type of things. And this is obviously, these two type of issues are going to happen all the time when you try to build your own, right? And that's where technology can come in and assist with these type of issues.
Excellent. Well, folks, we're getting into the wrap up here. Going to start talking about some Bugcrowd and Nucleus specific issues. I want to thank everybody who's been active with us here today. If you do have questions, you can go ahead and start putting those in the chat now. We'll be continuing on with the discussion here. So yeah, Jeff, why don't you talk a little bit about the Nucleus approach to what we've been talking about here today?
Yeah, no problem. So Nucleus, I mean, as a CISO myself, I kind of think of it as the SIM of vulnerability management, right? We are bringing all of the disparate tools, and instead of log lines, we're bringing in all of the asset data, the vulnerability data, and all the enrichment data all into one big data platform. And that data core, obviously, we focus on consolidation, enrichment, prioritizing, coordinate, and connect. You know, focus on the big data part of this. And really the big power of Nucleus is the fact that all of this is done automatically. So we have automation rules that come into play. So you would think of it as the meat and potatoes is just, hey, I'm going to go in and solve this problem. I'm going to bring in all of this data from all of these tools and normalize it. Well, I'll give you an example. Literally working with an auditor this week. That was on Tuesday, I believe. And working with that auditor, and he was spending, I think he spent most of the latter part of a week, so nearly 5 days, trying to get an assessment done and normalize the data. And he was going through and he was using AI and Python and all the different tools and technologies that are available to auditors, right? Those are people that we wouldn't normally think of that might need help in this area, to try to just get a unique list of CVEs and what each asset that CVE is attached to. Well, I saw the power of Nucleus very quickly because I said, oh, you know what? Nucleus does this really well. Let me just try something. Give me your data. I grabbed literally the 30 files. I dragged and dropped them onto the UI. And within a minute, those were all processed and gave me the 1400 and X change of unique findings. And I hit export and I handed him the file. And that was just a real powerful message of like, more than just security teams are struggling with this type of question, right? If you're having to deal with compliance, God rest your soul, just like, myself and my teams are having to deal with FedRAMP and other, government type agencies, it gets complicated and it gets busy very, very quickly. And that data is huge. And they're methodical. We have to do this monthly reporting on those, right? When it comes to FedRAMP, ConMon, all of those things are things that you have to do. And, when it comes to, imagine that was just by the way, with just tens of assets that he was struggling with the numbers of findings with, right? In a little bit, we'll talk about a case study. Even if you have tens and or thousands of assets, that could mean hundreds of thousands or millions of findings within those. So that's what Nucleus does, is it brings all that data, whether it's from your asset tools, whether it's from your cloud scanners, whether it's from your web app scanners, code scanners, container scanners. All of those are different scanning tools. We bring all that into the Nucleus data platform, plop it and enrich it with all of the different enrichment data like CISA, KEV, and EPSS, and then provide an easy way to report it out, whether it's our APIs or other means.
Back in the day, we used to call it the glue of vulnerability management, but that didn't sound as cool as data core, so now we call it data core.
Fabric.
Yeah. All right. I think let's make sure Trey gets some time here to talk Bugcrowd related matters.
Oh no.
So Trey, I know you work with teams that rely heavily on point in time testing. Curious to know, why isn't that enough anymore, and how do more continuous approaches sort of change the game?
State and trend.
Back
Gosh,
to it.
back in the day, we used to ship code. We would, we would receive boxes of floppy disks or a CD-ROM, so we could run around and patch all of our machines, or load it up onto whatever our Novell file share was, so we could run around and patch centrally. Like, no, we've come a long ways, and we live in a cloud native universe where we're shipping code across multiple teams several times a day, and so change management is a very high velocity thing. And so I don't know that compliance has thought about this enough. PCI, I think almost 20 years ago, came out and said, gosh, do a pen test after any significant change, once a year after any significant change. They got it right in spirit and intent, but that's not how we sell, and that's not how we have scaled our ability to maintain visibility on what's happening out there on the internet. And so if we go the other direction and say, gosh, I'm spending all this money on tooling for my engineers. I've got security tests in the integration pipeline. We're doing all this testing and developer training and unit testing, integration tests, all these things. And we get one shot a year to get a picture of where we're currently vulnerable out there on the internet with literally hundreds or thousands of production code changes a year. This is terrifying. And what I would ask is if there was a way to democratize or federate this research, not just for the diversity of perspective and experience and specialization around the globe, but to literally let anybody come back and say, hey, I found a thing. We should talk about it. My challenge to security teams and to anyone here is this notion of, if you're vulnerable, do you care where it's coming from? If someone lets you know, you want to know if you're vulnerable. And so the partnership that we bring forward, if you want to go to the next slide, what we're doing at Bugcrowd is partnering with the security research community to bring in testing for you. So whether that's through just a disclosure program or a managed bug bounty program, what we've got is specialization from around the globe, whether it's a public or a private bounty with a small hand-selected group of specialized researchers. We're a security intelligence platform that's bringing in crowdsourced specialized research to let you know where you're vulnerable right now. And what this is giving you that trailing proxy indicator and painting the picture of how's the rest of your security program working. And so in the same way that, we've spoken about Nucleus today, answering the very expensive question of where am I today? What is my trend? And what are the most important things that need to be done right now, and getting it to the people that can fix it? That's what we're here to do.
Well said. Thank you, Trey. And quick case study here from you, Jeff. Can you walk us through this use case and what changed with this customer when they moved to a consolidated model of VM?
Yeah. And some of these we all highlighted from before, right? This was a customer. Obviously, they had thousands of assets, and that led to tens of thousands of findings, right? And prioritization was an issue. Just sheer amounts of data and tons of duplicates were called out, right? But looking at this, and this customer really led into the enrichment side of things as well. So not only did the meat and potatoes of normalizing the data and removing the duplicates really resonate in all of those automation rules, but they actually reclassed a lot of their vulnerabilities based on that enrichment data, right? What is Mandiant saying? What is Nucleus VIP saying on insights? What is EPSS saying? And they're reclassing those and then changing all of those vulnerabilities, regardless of what the CVE or the scanner might say, based on what those analysts are saying. And then they use that to basically work off, and that's their metric, right? And that's what they're using to measure and what they're using to work with their SLAs moving forward.
Great stuff. And Trey, how do executive dashboards and transparency tend to drive culture change inside security orgs?
Oh my gosh, it's the proverbial single pane of glass.
Oh no, you said it.
What I think, if we could be intellectually rigorous and thoughtful, we need to have a handful of what Jeff mentioned earlier, the most important questions. There's very specific questions. What are we trying to achieve? And so whether you're looking at a capital event like due diligence for an exit or a company acquisition or sale, or if you're answering to fairly concerned customers or pressing on an auditor, the outcomes need to be aligned to a handful of critical outcomes. And so being able to measure your current state and trend across those axes. So vulnerability management, fairly straightforward, extremely expensive questions to answer if you're doing it manually. It's inhumane, it's not efficient. And if you're doing it effectively, you've created technical debt, which seems like a waste as well. End of life software, like end of life hardware. The number of acquisitions I've seen go through where they didn't have an honest picture of where they were in terms of dependencies and where things were going out of line. What we're doing by bringing clarity as security leaders on what the most important things that need to be done, this is what we draw forward. This is how we answer those questions. What I've found in my journeys is if you take a look at the cyber insurance questionnaires, they have brought forward. I'm going to make a joke about the bookies, but the folks that are placing bets on whether or not you're going to get hacked, they're asking a handful of what I would call very expensive questions that they've had to pay for to identify and to clarify. And while some of the questions are terrible, they're asking a yes no question. What that question is and how we think about our capability maturity against that question, our ability to answer where we are and where we're going, it brings clarity. It brings a sense of purpose and mission, not only to our teams, but to the partner teams we're leading on. It removes the fragmentation. It removes the uncertainty. We know what success looks like.
Excellent. And that was a great piece of sort of, closing advice for the audience. Jeff, did you have anything? If there was one thing that bubbled up to the top for you during this conversation regarding the shift, helping people go from chaos to clarity, what would that be if anything came up for you?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, it's writing down all those problems you're trying to solve and focusing on writing down what those outcomes are, and making sure that those are the most important things to the company, right? Ask yourself those challenging questions. Take the OKR approach, right? Is this the right thing to do now? And then obviously, we've been harping on this the whole time, but invest in automation.
Excellent. Well, I want to thank you both for joining us today, and to all the audience that stuck with us through almost the whole hour. If you want to check out Nucleus Security or Bugcrowd online, you can scan these QR codes real quick with your phone, or you can go to nucleussec.com or nucleussecurity.com. And then I believe, Trey, correct me if I'm wrong, it's simply bugcrowd.com, correct?
Bugcrowd.com.
Fantastic. Well, again, thank you both for being here and contributing your insights from the field. We really appreciate it. And thank you to everybody who joined us today. We'll see you on the next webinar.
Thank you.
Thank you.